Losing your job sucks. Losing your job and then having your former employer wish you all the best in your future endeavours somehow sucks even more, you condescending bastards. Anyway, now feels like as good a time as any for this list, which may need to be added to whilst I'm recording it, the way things are going. I'm Adam Wilborn from What Culture, and these are the 10 most shocking WWE releases ever. Number 10, Braun Strowman. Braun Strowman was the headline name amongst yet another string of WWE talent cuts in 2021, chiefly on account of the fact that he got his pink slip just weeks removed from co-headlining WrestleMania Backlash for the WWE Championship, and of course working on a long and gooey feud with Shane McMahon ahead of a cage match on the Show of Shows itself. Reports quickly emerged that a huge deal Strowman had signed in 2019 may have been the primary motivation. As with most recent releases, budget cuts was given as the primary reason. Bollocks. The monster among men may have represented one of the bigger ones that they could have made. Still, the ripple effect of his exit will be felt for weeks and months to come. WWE aren't just producing television that feels meaningless in the moment, they are now publicly acknowledging that the superstars themselves can be held in similarly low regard. Strowman wasn't just in major programs this year, but massive ones last year too. He was a surrogate for Roman Reigns over the company's Performance Center Summer, winning the Universal Championship at WrestleMania 36 from bloody Goldberg, and carrying it until SummerSlam, where the Tribal Chief, of course, made his shocking return. That somebody who was plugged in at that level could be booted out just a year later will doubtlessly serve as a reminder, if one was even needed, to the rest of the roster that nobody is safe. Number 9, Emma. That Emma had experienced a rather tumultuous run in 2017 had been largely forgotten by the time she was released, mainly because she just played a crucial role in kicking off one of the most important NXT to main roster transitions in the system's history. Emma Lena, the transformation to and then rapid back out of, was an unmitigated disaster that apparently put something of a barrier up between the former NXT favourite and several backstage. Her lack of confidence in the probably actually let's just call it what it is, crap character did her no favours politically, but this should have been brushed aside following the performances she gave on the losing end of matches against the debuting Asuka at TLC 2017 and Monday Night Raw the next night. As she'd done in NXT, Emma helped get the act all the way over from the off, and the defeats looked like the sort that would ultimately be rewarded with something for her when the time was right. Instead, within days of the second match, she was fired. Thanks, love. Number 8, Dawn Marie. Nobody should have been that shocked when news broke that Dawn Marie had been released in 2005, but they were because, me included, everybody somehow always forgets that WWE is far from a nice company and is owned and operated by somebody who is far from being a nice man. He is the yin to Simon Miller's yang, basically. Marie wasn't being used regularly at the time, though she had appeared at the beloved ECW reunion show One Night Stand just days before getting a release. Also, she was pregnant. Pleasingly, Marie challenged the company over her exit, with the legal case noting that her job had been considered safe before she was cut. Going through the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission, she cited the termination of her contract as a wrongful dismissal that had caused her considerable and understandable mental distress. The two sides came to a settlement in 2007, and Marie kicked off a new chapter of her life, retraining as a nurse. Better to help people than work for a man that's beyond the very notion of it. Number 7, The Ultimate Warrior. On 2 separate occasions, Vince McMahon has said in front of a camera that he couldn't wait to fire the Ultimate Warrior in 1991, but the former WWE Champion's absence was handled with such striking erasure after SummerSlam that it was more of a shock to the system to see him return several months later than to miss him in the first place. What relatively few people knew then, that everybody does now, is what brought the relationship to such an impasse. Warrior's request for the same money as Hulk Hogan ahead of the August pay-per-view just didn't sit well with McMahon, who tore him to shreds in response ahead of their SummerSlam showdown. After being the 1A to Hogan's 1 since 1989, Warrior was gone as if he'd never even been there, and before the match had even finished 2, with the match designed to keep Hogan and newcomer Sid Vicious in the spotlight. The man from parts unknown got the money wanted that night, but only that. Future comebacks were fleeting because the symbiotic relationship that bonded promoter and performer was forever frayed. Number 6, Kurt Angle. A rare example of WWE doing right by the unraveling mental and physical health of a talent, Kurt Angle's story speaks as much to its time frame as it does to any kind of magnanimous gesture from Vince McMahon, or whomever had the final say on the Olympian's departure. By 2006, the company were attempting to establish a new reputation empowered by a wellness policy enforced after the death of Eddie Guerrero. Though later shamed by the findings from the Benoit family tragedy a year later, it was with this mindset that the company attempted to heal some of Kurt's wounds before opening them up wider. Angle has since admitted that he made no secret of just how much he was hurting at the time and requested his release, but he's noted how the rehab WWE suggested simply was not an option. The broken bones and torn muscles were the problem, not, in his mind, a spiraling painkiller addiction. Spun by WWE as an attempt to save Angle from himself, the release came with the assumption that the former multi-time champion would be back when he felt good to go. Having bullheadedly protested that he was, Angle raced into the waiting arms of TNA, debuting just 2 months on from his departure. Number 5. Daniel Bryan. An easy choice to make for the company, despite how jaw-dropping it felt for fans of the former American Dragon. Daniel Bryan's 2010 sacking was seemingly more devastating to his fans than the man himself. Having been informed that his choking assault on Justin Roberts during the Nexus's destruction of Monday Night Raw was beyond the tolerance of moneyed sponsors Mattel, Bryan was given the boot before the angle was fleshed out. It proved to be a blessing in disguise. Cast out in storylines by a remorseful Wade Barrett, who's my best friend. Have I mentioned that? Anyway, Barrett claimed Bryan wasn't tough enough to get behind the cause, and then Bryan returned from the cold at SummerSlam just in time to help a John Cena-led WWE A-team beat the Nexus. Dumb decision that. He was on the right side of the ring there though, and the right side of history long term. The varying fates of his former C-Show colleagues couldn't compare to the push he somehow managed to squeeze out of a ludicrously stubborn Vince McMahon 4 years later. Number 4. Mike Chioda. Mike Chioda. Just made myself sad. Unless your name ends in McMahon, there is seemingly no job for life in WWE. Beloved timekeeper and expert can chucker Mark Yeaton was hoofed. Bruce Pritchard had to leave and completely reinvent his public perception to come back. And even jack of all trades ex-wrestlers, more on that later, never seemingly make it to pension age. Mike Chioda looked like an exception until WWE's brutal reminder to never say never in pro wrestling. As with Braun Strowman, budget cuts were cited, and it was assumed that Chioda's 30-plus year run with the company had resulted in a contract too great for them to want to fulfill any longer. As covered extensively following his 2020 departure, Chioda was more than just the high-profile man in the middle for the company, working on the crew ahead of and after live events and TV tapings. All that experience, know-how, and skill was deemed surplus. What chance did an Aleister Black or Santana Garrett ever have? Number 3. Selena Vega. A checkpoint in discourse history because it briefly brought conversation back around to wrestler unionization before, as always, it disappeared back into the swamp like everything else. Selena Vega's late 2020 exit came following a grim edict WWE laid down upon its independent contractors about outside earnings. Vega was making a more than tidy sum as a Twitch streamer and elected to keep that enterprise in the face of the ruling. She was subsequently released for her choice. There was much to pick at from this. If performers are making money elsewhere, are WWE even paying enough? And if they need creative expression in their hobby, what does it say about their bloody job? But fundamentally, it came back down to the company's classification of its talent. If wrestlers were paid up, pensioned, and protected employees, this sort of decision would be in keeping with most corporate enterprises and a near reasonable request. But they're not, it wasn't, and Vega suffered the consequences. Number 2. Serena Deeb. Obviously, claims of sexism and ageism would be refuted by WWE should they be brought to their door in regards to Serena Deeb's 2020 release. But might it be that those making these decisions didn't realise how institutionalised those practices were? In the form of her Double or Nothing clash with Riho, Deeb just had one of 2021's best matches, despite there being no build and the match itself taking place on the pay-per-view pre-show. This continues an awesome pandemic-era run with the promotion and the NWA that has propelled her to the best best in the world conversations right as wrestling prepares to return to normality. Oozing class and working with sublime and scintillating in-ring confidence against a generation of wrestlers she nearly lost the opportunity to compete against at all, WWE's loss has been everybody else's gain. Not that they'd even be mindful of it. They didn't even know what they had to begin with. Number 1. Steve Lombardi. Steve Lombardi was such a nailed-on WWE lifer that he became an on- and off-screen punchline reference for it. As late as 2013, the Brooklyn Brawler was trotted out as the company's most famous jobber, and as recent as 2018, he was considered enough of a legend to be brought back for yet another insufferable Raw ratings grab. Little of this mattered though when he was binned in 2016 after 33 years with the group. Reporting on it for PW Insider, Mike Johnson called it perhaps the most shocking WWE release ever, noting that Lombardi had been a far more valuable asset to the company behind the scenes. He was the person that every talent, upon trying out, had to cut promos for, and his praise or criticism would factor greatly into whether the talent would get a bigger look from the company. WWE's star creation machine had been in terminal decline since the early 2000s, but that's been expedited over the last few years specifically. Lombardi's layoff may be even more short-sighted now than it first looked. And that's our list. Did we miss any out? Let us know in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And subscribe to What Culture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from for daily wrestling podcasts where we've talked a whole load about the recent WWE releases. You can let us know your thoughts and Twitter questions as well on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE, and you can follow me there at Adam Wilborn. Thanks for watching. I've been Adam from What Culture, and best of luck in your future endeavours.